welcome back everyone. As we've heard, live ops is an important component of modern game development, but what exactly is live ops? Well, here to answer that and many more questions, it's James Gwertzman, General Manager of PlayFab. James, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm great. Excited to be here. Missing San Francisco, but happy to be on studio today.
Yeah, if you can't be at GDC, which unfortunately none of us can, this is probably the second best thing.
Absolutely. I'm glad everyone's tuning in to participate live with us.
So, not for my own sake, but maybe for the people out there watching, what exactly is live ops? What does live ops mean?
Yeah, so games have gone through this massive transformation in the last decade, 2 decades. We used to be, when I first got into gaming, we'd build a game, put it in a box, sell it in a store, you'd buy it, you'd play for 8, 12 hours, 20 hours maybe if you're lucky, and then you're done. You put it on the shelf and the studio moves on and builds a sequel. In the last couple of years, that's really changed. Games are no longer these one-off packaged goods, they're now services. You build a game, you launch it, and that's just the beginning. Now, as a developer, you're continually operating and updating and keeping this game live because you're learning that in a world where Netflix is one click away or other games are one click away on your phone, as a developer, you want to keep the attention of your players. And so games have really morphed now into not just services, but almost communities. And I would say Fortnite, probably the most famous example, because in Fortnite, we all know the season is going through, but that's a service where you log on and it's continually being updated, continually changing it, and it's free. There's this ongoing experience. And so in a world where games are now these services, and arguably developers are even trying to make them into communities, running that requires a whole new discipline, and we call that live ops. And live ops is sort of everything you do after you launch the game. It's updating the game with all the techniques. It's personalizing it. It's just that set of operations, and it requires a whole bunch of new technologies and services to make that possible.
And so how do developers use live ops? How are they actively trying to learn and adjust to live ops?
Right. So I think this is one of the fun things we've been talking about, in our GDCs over the last couple of years. Is it used to be you'd come here and all you talk about is graphics and audio and physics and game design and storytelling. And now we've added this extra topic now, right? Live ops, because it's its own discipline unto itself. It starts with really a mindset shift more than anything else. It's about how do we no longer just take this idea in our heads, this beautiful vision of a game that we're going to ship. But how do we now shift to realizing that we're going to be continually upgrading and shifting and morphing this game over for lucky many, many years. Good games can be live for a decade or more. And so that's the mindset. For instance, super long ultra marathon of a game development, we have to change how we do it. And there's a whole bunch of new techniques we've got to learn as developers. We've got to learn how do we change our production pipelines. So it's not okay to start a production pipeline and ship content 3 years later. We've got to be able to update continuously. And if there's a topical live event going on in the real world, how do we produce new content and have it live in our game in a matter of days?
And you've seen that.
All the time, yeah.
With esports events especially, you'll see it in say Clash Royale, that'll be remember to watch right now, it's going live kind of thing, pushing to their community.
That's right. So you've got to be able to get your content pipeline tuned to produce content faster. You've got to be able to learn what's going on in your game. So suddenly analytics and telemetry and listening systems to hear what your players are doing become important. Not just letting the games talk back and send data back to servers so we can monitor the game, but even listening on Discord and Twitch and seeing sort of what your players are doing so that you can use it to inform the next round of updates you're doing. Okay. You've also got to be able to personalize because every player is different. And if your goal is to really maximize that engagement and make it super fun, you may start to actually change the game experience for different players. You may have, in a game that's free to play, I'm sure you've seen this, the items and offers and promotions you get offered may be different than the promotions your friend gets offered. Because if I'm a super elite, level 80 player, I'm not going to want to buy or be offered the same bundle that a brand new player would be offered. And so you've got to be able to design the systems like that. And so it really is a whole new discipline, and teams are learning a whole new culture, a whole new way of thinking about running their studio.
Well, this is something that you keep mentioning. You said at the start of our conversation, but it's the community. How has this importance on community kind of shifted game development's focus onto live ops? Do you think developers desire that vocal community? Because we've seen it kind of work the opposite end, where the vocal community can be a bit of a hindrance as well.
I mean, if you ask any developer, do you want to have a rabidly passionate, engaged community of players or not? They're going to say, of course they do.
Right.
with all the warts and all, right? Because yes, I think if players are deeply in love with your game and your characters and your IP and your franchise, they want more of it. And thanks to now this notion of live ops and games as services and games as communities, we can give them more. We're not limited to say, okay, stay tuned, come back in 3 years. Now we can keep pushing new updates. That also means, though, that when players are unhappy, they've got more voices now than ever before. I mean, with tweets and again, go back to Discord and just community engagement tools. Angry players, you're going to hear from them. And I think it is a double-edged sword. I think what that means, though, is that players are arguably more powerful than ever before. And I actually think of it as more like, instead of this notion of I am the game designer, all powerful, almighty designer, I am going to give you the community content and you're going to like it. That doesn't work anymore,
No.
And you just look at things like Comic-Con and you look at how powerful now fans are. Even, this is happening across all of entertainment, especially in games.
What was it? The Sonic movie. They literally changed the entire animation of Sonic.
Is that right? Because based on the
Because
community.
the outlash
Yeah.
or the outcry.
That's right. And so I think because fans are more powerful than ever before, they have a seat at the table. And so good designers are saying, how do we design? Well, okay, I'll give you an analogy. My favorite analogy. It's no longer about game designer as movie director. I'm going to give you this experience and you're going to like it. It's more like nightclub impresario or cruise ship director, which is like, I'm going to design an experience. Imagine designing a game where the goal of the game is to have as many opportunities for really awesome player-to-player interaction as possible. So when you're designing a game like a Fortnite, you're not saying, here's this crafted, plot-driven experience I'm delivering. You're asking, how do I create an environment where players are going to have the most meaningful interactions with each other that's going to ultimately create this evergreen, ever-living experience. And by the way, it doesn't mean there's no role for plot and story anymore. It just means that your mindset is shifting. And I'm hoping there will still always be huge AAA awesome crafted experiences, but starting to think more open world, starting to think more opportunities for this ever-growing, evolving world where players can have different experiences. That's really where it's going more.
Where do you think, or how do you think developers can have a healthy communication with their community and how to listen and sort of take what they say and implement it into the game?
So it definitely starts with being able to listen, right? Just having the tools to listen. And that can be as simple as community managers who are out there, checking message boards. It also, in most cases, involves sophisticated telemetry systems. So you're actually measuring data so you can see what players are really doing. Because players will often complain, I don't like this. And then what you're going to see is they really do like it. They just, it's like saying, oh, I always floss.
It's the vocal minority.
That's right. It's a vocal minority. And if you look at what's really going on in your game, you've got to be able to look at the data and really make decisions with that in mind. Not entirely driven by data. If you just look at data, you might get an experience that sort of crafts the numbers and doesn't have any sort of artistic integrity. But you've got to be able to balance it and use it to basically figure out how to ultimately drive that success.
How many of you are following a live ops practice, and what was the first thing you did?
Sure. So I think this means that kind of, all right, so that actually meant is more of a shout out, I think, to the community, which is, for people who are listening at home, for those of you who are following us along, we would love to hear from you, which is if you're on there, let us know if you are a game developer who is following live ops in your studio. And we'd love to hear little quips about some of the experiences you've had. And I think later on, maybe we can read some of those back if we come in. Yeah.
Fantastic. Given the cultural shifts that we've seen, especially in gaming in the last few years, what are the top 3 components of a successful live ops strategy?
So we like to break it down into the 3 parts, and I think of these as almost like a stack. The first part is the game itself. So what is live ops? Let's break down live ops, right? Live and ops, all right? So there's 2 parts there. So the first part is a live game, which means the game is connected to the internet, it's live, it's living. A game like Fortnite or a game like League of Legends, or frankly, most mobile games are live in that they have the capability of being updated and
Do you think that there's a limitation to that? Because say something like Stardew Valley, which isn't live except for their new multiplayer thing that they added within the last year, they still updated it. So does it have to be an online game?
No, it doesn't have to be. I would say the easiest way to get that ongoing sense of engagement and retention is to have an online game. It doesn't have to be. You're right. But we look at it as it starts with having at least a connectivity to do updates and patches and have transactions and so on. That's live. Then there's the ops part. The ops part talks to this notion that you as a studio is doing ongoing operations. You're creating the content, you're personalizing your experiences, you're reacting to what's going on. So those are the 2 parts. When we think about, and within PlayFab, for example, when we look at the way we've broken out our offerings, we have live services. These are things for those games that are multiplayer, that are live. Things like matchmaking and leaderboards and server hosting and chat and voice, and text and voice chat. And we really look to break the barriers down with our players as much as we can. So we have things like real-world language translation. So I can speak in French, and you can read it in English, and you can speak in English, and I can read it in Russian if we're coming across different languages.
We talked about it earlier, but accessibility.
Accessibility is huge. We have a lot of one of the things we've added to our system that we're really proud of is when we're doing voice chat, we have closed captioning available. So if I'm deaf, but I want to play my game, I can still read what everyone's saying and feel part of that experience, which is crazy. It's crazy what you can do now in the cloud. So for games, so that's the live part. Then there's next part is probably data and data telemetry. I've mentioned it a few times now. The ability to gather data from your game, analyze it, generate insights, figure out what your players want, and then be able to make changes and run experiments and see the impact and use that to guide your development. That's critical. You've got to be able to iterate your game and see the effect of that over time. That's data. And the third part really is the tools around the live ops experience itself. The ability to update the game, make the changes, personalize the experiences, run the experiments we just talked about. That live ops kind of specific tools, that's the third part.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess this is a little bit of a silly question, but which part's the most important?
Yeah, all. Yeah,
all
yes,
of them, yeah.
Yes,
okay, okay. That's kind of what I figured.
No, but I will say this: if a developer comes to me and says, okay, I've been building games for 20 years, but I'm new to this whole live ops thing. Where do I start? We would say start with content updates. Okay. Just start with the ability to make changes to your game. Sounds trivial, but just the ability to make changes to a game that's already out in the market is anything but trivial.
Is that content story-driven content? Is it like character skins? Because you were talking about Fortnite before, which was obviously a huge proponent. Every week they would come up with new skins. What content should they be focusing on?
Again, yes,
all of it.
That's a part that's genre specific. So if I'm making a very story-driven game, it's going to be a very linear on-rails experience. I might want to simply say, how do we start adding new episodes? Or how do we start making that a little bit more bite-sized? So it's not every 3 years between releases, but more short updates. Versus if it's a more traditional online game, it's way more obvious. You can do skins, you can do new items, you can have the item of the week, you can have live events. Live events are probably the second thing I tell people to do, is once you've got the ability to do content updates, then start thinking about events. Events are probably the single biggest thing you can do to drive that engagement, is things like 4th of July or Valentine's Day.
Or even now we're seeing a further step into that where they're having live concerts.
Sure, yeah, well, yeah, and that's really that was really the moment that I think a lot of people woke up and said, wow, this is now not this game, this is an entire cultural movement, is when you're having Marshmello playing in Fortnite with 7 million live fans in a game experience. Something big's going on here.
What do you think is the biggest difference? Because, and I'll even pick a more recent game, The Witcher 3, we saw 2 expansions from that. And expansions are games that we're kind of used to that aren't really online. What's the difference of a development of an expansion compared to live ops content?
I mean, it's all continuum, right? If one extreme is I'm doing sequels every 3 years, or 4 years, or 10 years, and the other extreme is constant weekly updates, and I think developers can be anywhere in that continuum. And we've seen people, even here at Microsoft, we have a lot of first-party studios. Almost all our studios are starting to think about, how do we start to shorten those timeframes? How do we start to create more
Is that more important? Is it shortening the timeframes? That's a focus for a lot of people?
It's about engagement. I mean, I would say that it's about, if I could pick one metric that matters as a game developer nowadays, it's player engagement. And engagement's a loose term. It's not monetization. I think a lot of the negative reaction sometimes fans have to this stuff is, oh, it's just money grubbing. It's just you're trying to take more money out of my wallet. I'm not saying we've never seen any of that. I think that's, and some bad actors have maybe spoiled the bunch, but I think the best developers, and I talk to a lot of them, they're not focusing specifically on monetization. They're focusing on engagement. How do I get my players to love my game to the point where it's a lifestyle. They're continually in there.
Well, that's how you create a community.
That's exactly right. And that's the ultimate. When we say people want to be a community, it's because they want their players to be that passionate and that engaging that every day they're logging in, every day they're in there playing, every day they're having experiences. And a great game is important. If you don't have a great game, you're not going to get that. But just a great game alone is going to eventually peter off. People will move on. You've got to have a great game and be continually updating it. Events, new content updates, new things that make the game fresh and interesting. That's what's going to keep it that ongoing engagement.
Well, speaking of engagement, we do have a message from our Discord. I'm sorry, I'm going to say your name wrong. Or Can you say that name?
Orchestration.
Oh, okay, there you go. Bam. Minimize or remove downtime. It's a hard thing to tackle, harder than to organize. People are really just now honing DevOps. LiveOps is super forward-thinking, cool stuff going on. Palmetto Bling.
Yeah, I'm gonna parse that. So DevOps is interesting because LiveOps is influenced by this term of DevOps. DevOps, I would say, is state-of-the-art in any sort of development. This idea that when you're launching services or when you're running anything in the cloud, you want to you have your developers doing the operations. You no longer have an ops team where you build as a code, ship it over to the wall, and your developers like roll it out. You're actually moving this model now where the developers are continually updating the code themselves. And what this person's talking about is when you're launching these services, doing it in such a way you've never have scheduled downtime. I don't know if you've noticed, but it used to be every Sunday night for 6 hours, games are offline. That doesn't happen anymore. It shouldn't with modern games. You know, if anyone's using PlayFab, for example, our services have no scheduled downtime, 0. And because of the cloud, we can do that. Now what we can do is, when we have an update to make, we can spin up an entire other version of PlayFab, basically, with all the services we provide, start to slowly move traffic over to it. And once it's stable and everyone's switched over, take down the old one. And no one ever needs to know that there was any sort of update happening. And so most games should be moving to this model of no downtime. And the technology supports that.
Another question from Discord. Hi. Could you elaborate on PlayFab and Unity integration from I Am Not Fred? You know, I don't believe you. I feel like that's Fred speaking.
Yeah, that's definitely Fred. Yeah. So Unity is probably the most popular game engine that our developers are using. So PlayFab, so we haven't even said what PlayFab is.
You're right. No, that was actually the next question, but I'd like to get to these Discords.
I do. I'll just jump in and say, look, what is PlayFab? So PlayFab, so I've been in gaming now for 20 years, and I saw this transition from games as packaged goods to games as services. In fact, I was actually living in China, running the PopCap game studios in China, Plants vs. Zombies and the Jewel and so on. And we were building a version of Plants vs. Zombies for the Chinese market that was free to play, called Plants vs. Zombies Great Wall Edition, which no one here has ever heard of, but was amazing. And it was my first foray into games as services. And we were running this game as a service with all the things we've talked about. And it was hard, and we had to build a lot of technology from scratch to do it. And so when I came back to the US, and EA had bought PopCap, and I was then sort of now working for EA. All across EA, I saw teams doing the same thing. They were all trying to convert from old school development to now LiveOps, and struggling because it's hard. And so that was when we said, hey, there's an opportunity here. Let's go build something called PlayFab. Let's go build this set of services that gives game developers, ideally, everything they need to build and operate these live games, this LiveOps solution. So we did that. We built it as a company, ran it for a couple of years, got a lot of success. And then Microsoft bought us 2 years ago because Microsoft sees this growth in gaming and recognizing that if we're going to build cloud services for games, we should really focus on this notion of LiveOps. So PlayFab is now part of Azure PlayFab. And we have technologies and services for almost everything developers need to build and operate their games.
This has been a fantastic talk. We actually, beforehand, were talking about questions to fill the time, but apparently we're out of time already. Wow. Which I'm kind of sad because these other questions, I was really excited. But James, thank you so much. And if you guys want to learn, please head on over to playfab.com or check out our LiveOps videos on demand in our YouTube playlist.